Hello, and welcome to episode 9 of Modern Media Review. I'm Robin Gibson.
And I'm Sean Gollogly.
And we've just been watching the live final on BBC Two of Icons, which was their attempt to crown, well not attempt, they did crown, the greatest figure of the 20th century. Who turned out to be Alan Turing, which was a bit of a turn-up.
It was a massive turn-up. And also it's a massive shout to call out an icon of the 20th century, because I guess there have been a few, to be honest. And it was a bit like Turing winning. And I've got to say, Robin, and I've got to stop saying I've got to say, I found it very exciting. The whole thing, I was really up for it and all the rest of it.
But really, because I was excited about the concept of it, but the reality of the series, which went on for weeks and weeks and weeks, seemed a bit boring. It was like when Big Brother started up, and you thought this was going to be a fascinating sociological experiment, and it just turned out to be a load of boring people gazing at their navels and insulting each other. Not that this was like that, but it was a bit weird that Turing won it. It was a bit like the Lib Dems winning an election or Dulwich Hamlet winning the FA Cup. A nice idea, but unlikely. But then it happened.
It did happen. Well, like so many things that have happened in the last couple of years politically, you know, if you look at that Donald Trump getting elected and Brexit and all the rest of it, you know, nothing surprises anymore, you know?
No, but what I was struggling to deal with when I watched it was a live public vote, was how did it happen? In fact, I was at the football the other week, and the guy behind me, after a particularly appalling move by St Mirren, shouted out, "Why is that?" Which I thought was quite an existential question for football, but you could equally ask the same about here. At first I thought it might be like Bob Nudd syndrome. He was the fisherman who got the most votes for Sports Personality of the Year.
Hold on, Robin.
Ages ago.
Hold on, Robin. You can't say just a fisherman about Bob Nudd.
Well, I can.
Well, he was the 4-time individual world freshwater Anglian champion. Anglian. I think he might have come from Anglia, but he was the 4-time world champion, yeah? And he writes monthly, if you're interested, mate, because I know in Modern Media Review we are interested in things like this, yeah. But he writes monthly for Course Fishing Answers and Improve Your Course Fishing magazine.
I can see you've done your research on Bob Nudd here, but Course Fishing Answers might be something that we should review in the future, but at the moment, let's put it to one side. The fact is that it was not a rigged vote for Sports Personality of the Year, but his fan club or something organised a campaign to
a bit like crowdfunding.
It was ahead of its time to make sure that he won it. So he was dissed off. So at first I thought it was a load of Turing fans, you know, because let's face it, he's beat a random but big name collection of finalists here in the likes of Nelson Mandela and David Bowie and Martin Luther King. He beat them all. I wondered maybe if it's like people who were asked after a bit of posthumous justice for him. Well, Robin, mind you, he already did get a pardon, didn't he?
Well, that's a little bit like, it's great getting a pardon, but you're already dead.
It doesn't help much, does it? Nor does winning a tacky plaque on a BBC talent show.
Did you see the state of the plaque?
The plaque was absolutely appalling. It looked like someone had knocked up in Photoshop in about 10 minutes.
Well, do you remember when you used to go down to your local sports shop and try and buy a sort of like Player of the Year award for football, yeah?
For your local team.
Yeah, for your local team, and it was a footballer on a stand and all the rest of it, and it cost about 50p and it was crap. And they said, but you could have this, which was really expensive. But no one ever bought that because it was just too expensive. You know?
It was awful, and when they presented it to Turing's niece, it was all very rushed the end of the show, because the presenters, Nick Robinson and
Claudia Winkleman.
You know?
Yeah,
Claudia Winkleman.
What do you mean the one that I know? Just because I watched Strictly?
Yeah, exactly. Well, they sort of announced it really, really hurriedly, and they dragged this poor woman on and slammed the plaque into her hand and then cut her out of the closing shot. It was as if they were all in a hurry to get home for something.
The whole thing seemed really half-arsed. It was a great idea, badly executed.
Yeah, but you know, was it a great idea? Because, as someone said on Twitter, it's a bit like asking the public to choose their favourite element in the periodic table. It's completely random, you know. The randomness of it made the final quite intriguing, and actually, you know, as we both like the odd bet, we found out there was, because it was a live show, we found out there was betting on it.
There was, and I'll just go, just before you go on, for people listening.
I won't go on.
Okay.
I never go on.
You always go on. There were basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 finalists, yeah? Nelson Mandela headed the market at 10 to 11. Martin Luther King weighing in at 9-2, Muhammad Ali at 9-2, Alan Turing at 9-2, David Bowie, joke that he's even in it, 14-1, Ernest Shackleton, how the hell did he make it, 50-1, and Pablo Picasso also an outlier at 50-1. So there were your runners and riders.
Well, Mandela was a shoo-in, wasn't he?
On that theme, Robin, I was right there with you, so I must have been one of the only people that was betting online as we were in running. And
oh, did you?
I had 100 quid on Mandela I had 110 quid to win 100, actually.
Wow.
And, which didn't go down well when it got beat. But I was in contact with Steve Freeth, who is the PR guy from Bet365, who are the world's favourite online bookmakers, by the way.
Yes, are we being sponsored by them or something?
Well, we might be. Well, I might be, not you. But Steve was saying to me, he said it was very, very light betting.
You surprised me.
Yeah, he said Mandela was obviously best backed, but he said there was an interesting move for Alan Turing. He said in the 2 days before the actual final that there was movement for Turing, which he was surprised about. But they said that they made a small profit on it, mostly because probably I lost 110 quid.
Yeah, that's a small profit for them, isn't
Yeah,
it?
exactly. Yeah.
I looked at the betting throughout. I didn't have a bet on it, but Mandela kept shortening as the show went on. He started off around about even money and ended up at like nearly 2-1 on.
Yeah.
If that's not too technical for modern media review listeners.
Well, yeah.
So he seemed nailed on.
Put £2 on to win £1.
He seemed absolutely nailed on, and yet you get this shock result. And yet, I thought maybe it's not so weird that Alan Turing's won. I mean, for a start, he's quite trendy, isn't he?
Well,
computers are trendy.
Well, Cumberbatch played him in the film, didn't he?
Don't know.
Well, he did. Modern Media Review, keeping up with all the latest reviews of cinema and all that stuff.
You can't see every film.
You can't see every film. But the point is, yes, and I think there was a big push for people to recognise this guy.
Yes, and I'm glad he won it. I mean, I'd have been glad if anyone had won it. Well, you're not, no. But they had these advocates for each category because they had like leaders, explorers, scientists, blah blah blah. And the guy who was the advocate for scientists and therefore Turing was Chris Packham. And who is he again?
He's a guy that works on is it Country File or something like that?
So he knows about the Earth, doesn't he?
Yeah,
he knows what the Earth's made of, so that qualifies him. His speech, looking back on it, was actually the best because he actually basically said that we drove Turing to suicide. I don't feel that I should be part of that we, but there you are. He also said that scientists are the only hope for the future. So basically saying it doesn't matter what all these other people did. Without the planet, they wouldn't be able to do anything. And Turing, apparently, by breaking the Enigma code and inventing computers or something or other, saved the planet. Well, is that going too far? It sounds a bit far. He actually said at one point, got everyone to bring out their phone, said, your phones are all a little bit of Alan Turing. He invented the future. And the future is now. And he'd have been bloody delighted by Facebook and Insta and all that, wouldn't he?
How on earth did Alexander Fleming not get in?
Did he even make the shortlist?
He didn't even get the shortlist. The man that invented penicillin, which I'm guessing must have saved a fair few folk in the 20th century, I'd hazard a guess, would you say, Robin?
Half the population, I'd imagine.
Of the world, you'd think. And never mind all the people that are queuing up down the old clap clinic. Yeah, millions of people across the world were saved by penicillin and modern-day antibiotics. Didn't even make the shortlist, which is an absolute disgrace. And also, in terms of a mathematician or a computer scientist or whatever, what about Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web?
Well, yeah, where would we be without him? We certainly wouldn't be here doing a podcast, would we?
We certainly wouldn't be. And we certainly wouldn't be spending all our times in restaurants not talking to our loved ones whilst tweeting.
There's a lot to be said for that.
There is a lot to be said for that. But what he did mention, and I was quite surprised about it, he was quite upset that Marie Curie didn't make the final.
Well, he actually said she should have been there. And this is a key thing about what is sort of grim about the Icons series. Although the public could vote on the 7 finalists, they were all chosen by the public from shortlists. But the shortlists were chosen by a bunch of... Well, look, the first name on the first shortlist is Paddy Ashdown. I don't think we need to go any further than that. A load of worthies, great and good intellectuals, academics, decided what we could vote for. which just seemed a bit
Well, it's very anti-Beeb.
patronising.
No, it's very anti-Beeb, isn't it?
Well, it's just patronising. It's also like that Boaty McBoatface thing where the public voted for a silly name for a boat and they were slapped down. And it's a bit like the Remain people in the Brexit argument telling the people who voted to leave that they're stupid and they don't know what they're on about. It's all patronising and mistrusting of the public. So we ended up with these shortlists, right, which was quite funny because BBC desperately tried to make it inclusive and diverse, and they had quite obscure people like in sport, which was won predictably by Muhammad Ali. They had like Tanny Gray-Thompson. They had Gertrude Bell.
Hold on. You're going too fast and too quick here because I need to pull you up on something. Sports stars, yeah? Muhammad Ali, I have no problem. Tanny Gray-Thompson, I understand why Tanny Gray was there and what she achieved was fantastic and all the rest of it. But there's a glaring omission here, isn't there?
No, what?
Jesse Owens.
Oh, yes, I guess you're right. That would have been diverse and inclusive and politically correct if that's what they wanted to do.
1936 Berlin Olympics, the man who gave the lie to Aryan supremacy in front of Adolf Hitler. That wouldn't have been a bad one, surely.
Yeah, they missed a trick there, didn't they?
Little bit.
Shortlist compilers.
A little bit.
They put in Billie Jean King.
Well, I guess
they were trying to get women in for a start, right? But the fact is,
no women got to the final,
and the final was all men.
Yeah,
they were glad about that. The whole show was. I mean, the whole thing was a bit weird. All these different tones, because when Nick Robinson and Claudia Winkleman hosted it.
Hasn't Claudia got lovely hair, though?
Oh, that was another brilliant tweet, slightly tangential. It said, "Every day is a Bird Box challenge for Claudia Winkleman." But they were hyping it up as they hosted it like it was the Eurovision Song Contest or Britain's Got Talent. But
which, by the way, Robin, if you look on the website, we have mentioned not the Bird Box Challenge, but we've done a little review of Bird Box, haven't we?
A review of Bird Box on the site. Nothing about Claudia Winkleman in it, though. But,
unfortunately.
The point, well, we can review her later. We're reviewing her now. The point is that they presented it as if it was a bit like Britain's Got Talent or something. But the actual tone of the content was more like a Melvin Bragg special.
Okay.
It was sort of drab and academic. And, this kind of justification for each one. Did they really need to justify each one? I suppose with Ernest Shackleton they did, because he was basically a failure, wasn't he?
Well, what a joke. That was the biggest joke. Ernest Shackleton never got to the South Pole. He's an Antarctic explorer, yeah? He never actually made it. Never made it to the South Pole. The guy that did never got a mention because he's Scandinavian, was Roald Amundsen. He's the man that actually did it.
I don't think Scandinavians were ruled out by nationality. They just didn't have anyone who was an icon.
And also, I'm sorry, Robin, but these guys that went skating across the ice in the Antarctic are a little bit like these fellas that now single-handedly row across the Atlantic in a bathtub full of baked beans. I mean, I'm not interested.
You're obsessed with this.
I am obsessed with it because it's a pointless exercise. You had Neil Armstrong in there, which I thought was a joke as well as an explorer. Because
he got to the moon.
He did get to the moon, but who was the first man that made space? Yuri Gagarin.
Oh, of course, yeah.
No, he wasn't, Robin. No, he wasn't. The first person to make, well, not a person, but the first living being made space was Laika, the dog, in 1957.
You could hardly call the dog an explorer, though. She didn't do it of her own accord. Was she female?
She was female. Born in Moscow, by the way.
Good.
But unfortunately for Laika, although she was the first dog in space, which I'm sure she was thrilled about, she didn't actually make it back.
She burned up.
Okay, yes. Originally, TASS and Pravda said that she was humanely euthanized, or was she caninely euthanized? I don't know. But yeah, she actually burned up. Some part of the rocket didn't work, and Laika had a terribly upsetting end.
That's the thing with these rockets when they don't work.
Yeah, they do.
Anyway, the thing about the guy who was advocating for Shackleton was Dermot Illyrian. The best he could manage to say was he looked cool in a jumper that he was wearing, and his main claim to fame seemed to be that he'd managed to go and get help, which isn't terribly inspiring.
I think his main claim to fame was that he actually managed to get back alive, which obviously Scott of the Antarctic didn't. But
well, as you said last week, that's something you aspire to, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ernest Shackleton brackets alive.
Yeah.
It's better than Captain Scott brackets dead, isn't it?
But appallingly homespun, this whole thing.
Well, yeah, you say that, but like in the shortlist, they had people like my favourite Chinese scientist, Tu Yu, and they had Gandhi in there, didn't they?
What, as an explorer?
No, as an activist.
Oh, by the way, have I ever told you? I have got a story about Gandhi.
Really?
Yeah, I used to work with a guy who was a surveyor who had been in the Indian Army. Around the time of the rebellion, as he called it, which to most people is India's struggle for independence. Gandhi was having a demonstration, and this guy that I knew was the officer in charge of stopping them get to the main town square. And he said, I put my barricades up, Sean, and Gandhi was not going to pass the barricade. I phoned HQ, and I said, do I have permission to shoot Gandhi? And I think they were a bit flummoxed at the other end of the line, because they came back very strongly saying, no, you cannot shoot Gandhi.
Your pal could have changed the course of history there, couldn't he?
Well, he wasn't my pal, but yes. Colleague, roughly. I used to make him tea and bring him tea in the morning. And he said, yes, exactly that. He said, I could have changed history. And he would pause for effect and say, for the better.
Yes, well, that's one view, isn't it?
Well, it was his view.
He was probably used to people bringing him tea and stuff like that, having served in India for so long.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I might as well have been his punkawalla, really.
But anyway, Gandhi didn't make it, so we ended up with this bizarre list, didn't we? Of Mandela, Shackleton, Turing, David Bowie, Martin Luther King, Muhammad Ali, and Picasso.
And please...
It's extremely random.
And please, Robin... David Bowie, I mean, I understand that he's died fairly recently, but are we really saying a man that sold 140 million albums, which is quite a lot, I guess, but...
Well,
Elvis?
Well, what I noticed when they were doing their advocacy was they were really just advocating for their category. They were saying entertainers are more important than explorers and so on, and Claire Balding, who did Muhammad Ali, did the second best speech, didn't she? Because he kind of said he fitted all categories. He was an explorer of physical boundaries. She was struggling with that one. He was an entertainer. He was an activist. But he didn't win.
No, he didn't.
They were basically saying you're voting for X scientist or entertainment, and that's where Turing won out, because right at the start of the speech he said science is more important than all this stuff, because without it the planet's going to die.
Who was the lassie that talked about art? Without art, that we might as well be living.
Lily Cole. Someone had given her some Mogadon at the door.
Yeah, well, but she did say
she didn't look very interested, did she?
But she did say, without art, what are we? I would have said better off. That's why I didn't back Picasso.
We'd have bare walls. I wouldn't have this Titian up on loan from the Royal Collection.
No, you probably wouldn't.
The thing that Claire Balding did say, not in her speech, but another point about the fact that they did bring up, they were really embarrassed about the fact that there were no women on the final list. And she said, quite interestingly, the 20th century was by men for men, and we have to wait 50 years, and then we'd be looking at Beyonce or Malala or J.K. Rowling. Which, not so sure about J.K. Rowling, but I get her point.
Well, I think
she got a bit of a cheer for that.
Throwing in J.K. Rowling and Beyonce and all the rest of it sounded like she had a good idea to say that women will rewrite the 21st century, but it sounded like she hadn't backed it up with a lot of thought and was coming out with stuff just off the cuff.
Oh, the problem I had with the whole thing was that, from my point of view, I just thought that all these icons were so sort of worthy. It was almost like a Boy Scout meeting or something. Everything was there was no excitement, and they were all good. You don't have to be good to be an icon, do you? We're talking about 20th century icons. What about Hindley and Brady?
Oh no! I'm not having
that.
I'm not having that. I'm not.
You know the reason. You know the reason they're so popular in the newspapers is the vicarious thrill people get from reading about them.
Well, Robin, the next thing you're going to be saying Hitler, Mao, Stalin. What about Michael Jackson?
I'm not putting him in with Hitler, Mao, and Stalin, if that's what you mean. But I would say, right, Michael Jackson, you've got a point there. I'd also add to him, say, Bob Marley. They, if you're talking about entertainers, were much more iconic and influential worldwide than David Bowie. They reached all continents, Jackson and Marley. So there's lots of things missing from this. It seemed very British, even though the finalists weren't all British.
Can I remind you of a conversation that we had in the pub several times? You said there were only 4 great entertainers in the world. Can you remember who you said they were?
No, I didn't say that. We've had this discussion before. What I said was there are only 4 people who are on everyone's T-shirts, whether you go to, India or Africa or America, and one of them was Bob Marley.
Yep.
One of them was John Lennon.
Yep.
One of them was Tupac Shakur.
We disagreed about that, but yeah.
But I've seen the T-shirts. It's
Well,
an observation, not a theory.
Well, seriously, I've walked down the street and seen someone wearing a T-shirt, but it doesn't make it fact.
Yeah, but I've been all over the world and seen Tupac Shakur in T-shirts, mate.
Okay.
Anyway, the point is I can't
Who was your fourth one?
That's what I can't remember.
Jimi Hendrix.
No, it wasn't Jimi Hendrix.
It was Jimi Hendrix.
Anyway, the fact that Bowie was in it was stupid anyway, because how can you stick him in the ring with Mandela and Martin Luther King?
Not
or
really.
Ali, for that matter.
Well, and never mind the finalists. I don't think you could put Bowie in with some of the people that didn't make it.
Put him in with Shackleton, because he'd just go for help. and he'd be alright, you know, because he'd have a big gang soon, you know, they'd have...
Well, I'll tell you what.
No problem dispatching Bowie.
Well, what Bowie needed was Shackleton's help when he was in his Berlin phase.
He needed a lot of help then.
Yeah, when he was doing Nazi salutes at Victoria Station.
Well, no, that was just a misunderstood wave, Sean.
It was a misunderstood wave. Very straight-armed, though.
I mean, it was all very British, even though most of the finalists weren't British, apart from Shackleton and Turing, the winner.
I think Shackleton was Irish, actually.
But in those days it was Britain, wasn't it?
Well, hang on. What, are you re-establishing the empire, mate?
What we've got here is, although it was meant to be diverse, we've got a list, world figures of the 20th century, the greatest figures, right? And if you look at it, 3 of the 7 are British or Irish. That's not proportionately correct. That's the sort of proportion you get from your mate who wanted to shoot Gandhi, isn't it?
Yeah, a bit. I mean,
it's nearly half British. I mean, what about Homer Simpson? He's an icon of the 20th century. It's carried on into the 21st.
Aren't they just doing? Is it 30 years of Homer Simpson?
There's your icon, mate.
But the other thing I was going to say to you, Robin, which just really dawned on me about this whole sort of thing about Auntie Beeb deciding who we couldn't vote for. Well, what about an alternative option? And what about we chose not only our own beginning, but our own ending? What do you think of that?
Well, for a start, in Icons, we didn't choose our own beginning, did we? Someone else, a bunch
That's
of
what I'm saying, yeah.
did.
That's what I'm saying.
You're talking about Bandersnatch, right? Which I haven't watched. That's the Black Mirror thing where you're meant to choose your own ending, isn't it? But who wants that?
I mean, it's a lovely idea. I think it's very clever, but it's a little too easy, isn't it? And it
I don't
also,
know, 'cause I haven't tried it.
Well, where does it lead you? Well, I was just thinking about it, yeah? And I was thinking The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas, which I watched the other night, which is a very touching film. What about the camp commandant, rather than his son getting gassed in the concentration camp, the camp commandant adopts the little lad in the striped pyjamas, i.e. in the guy in the camp, and they all live happily ever after. What about that?
We could do it with anything. I mean, I don't know how Bandersnatch works, but like one of my favourite books, The Grapes of Wrath, you could have arriving in California, starting Silicon Valley, and becoming .com millionaires.
Never mind that, mate. They meet Elon Musk.
Yeah, shoot off into space. The whole idea, I'm not saying it's wrong, and I'm sure to gamers, rather than TV watchers like me, it makes a lot of sense to kind of construct your own ending or your own episodes for a show, but I just think, if I'm reading a book, I don't want 5 copies of it to choose between.
Seriously, if I'm asked to be doing the ending, I might as well write the whole thing. Do you know what I mean?
I just think maybe that is the future, but I don't think I'm in it. Which is an interesting existential question.
Hey, what about this?
It's a complicated one.
What about this? If anyone's got this far in the podcast, what about alternative endings to this?
Well, that would be great if people could come up with alternative endings for Modern Media Review, because the ones we do at the moment aren't very good, are they? I mean, we're going to say, right about now, what we're going to do is say thanks for listening. We always say that. And visit the website, modernmediareview.com.
Robin, no one ever gets... Why don't we do this at the beginning? Because no one listens to this by the end.
Well, they might get bored at the beginning. So we also say listen to the podcast on the site or on YouTube. Subscribe on YouTube. We like that. We're on iTunes. We're on Spotify.
Yep.
And apart from suggesting a different ending, why not suggest something to do next week? Because I've got no idea what we're going to be talking about of you. And on that contemplative note, we'll say good night and thanks again.
Good night and thanks.
Yes, that's right. Bye.